Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining for our ATA CLC Connection live from the lounge today. The industry that we are highlighting is social work today. My name is Brittany Smith, and I am one of these 6 amazing peer mentors here in the Accelerated Transfer Academy, and I will also serve as the moderator for today's event. We are diving into a great conversation with our honored guest, whom I will introduce momentarily, about their career, education, transition into the workforce, and of course, any questions that you all may have. Before we get started, I want to cover some housekeeping items. This is an opportunity for you to engage and ask our guests lots of questions. To do so, please utilize the chat box for questions and commentary. We will ask your questions out loud and answer them live. Additionally, this event is being recorded and will be made available to you later to rewatch and to share with your peers. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I have the beautiful, amazing Miss Marisol here today.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Hi.
And so we're going to go ahead and get started with an icebreaker question. What is your favorite word?
Ooh, my favorite word. That's a good one because I am one of the ones that say awesome all the time. Like, oh, that's awesome. Like, no worries, awesome. And it's so overused. Like that might be part of when I try to see someone, I just try to use these friendly words, not friendly, but just kind of like exciting and like and awesome is like my go-to, like but yes, it's so definitely overused, but it's my go-to.
It's still one of my favorite words, definitely. And we're gonna do one more. If you could have any other profession other than the one you're in now, what would it be and why?
I would be a crime scene investigator. And,
oh, wow.
And that is interesting because I work in like such a trauma-focused field, but I genuinely love the whole investigative process of looking into a crime scene, seeing what happened. But I guess what tricks me is that I don't want to be a police officer to be a crime scene investigator. So social work is kind of like, I get to be like a little detective in a way. So I would have been a crime scene investigator if I would have been anything that if I could have just jumped into being a crime scene investigator, that would have been it.
Oh, wow. That's cool. Because I didn't even know that about
Yeah, we do so much in like what I'm doing right now that kind of touches on that. So I get a little taste of it, but that was one of the things I always wanted to do because I love the FBI, not FBI, forensic files. Watched on growing up. So
CSI and stuff like that.
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
I love it.
Love it. So we are going to go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes of today's interview with Ms. Marisol. So go ahead and share your educational background of who you are and what inspired you to be a social worker.
Perfect. So I currently have a master's degree in social work. I also obtained my bachelor's degree in social work, and I have an associate's degree of arts that I obtained at Lone Star College, but I obtained my bachelor's degree at UHD and then my master's at UH. So I started doing all of that in 2013. As soon as I graduated high school, I jumped right into community college, which was Lone Star College, and I did this quick, I transferred over to UHD, and then I can't believe how fast time flies because now I have my master's, and I only started my bachelor's in 2017 when Hurricane Harvey hit. I remember that was my first semester here. So that was very, a lot of stuff going on then, but then I obtained my master's in 2021. So during the pandemic was I getting my master's all online. And what inspired me to be a social worker was actually one of my professors at Lone Star College, because I was actually going to school to get a, it's kind of called like, I wanted to just be an X-ray technician. So all you had to do was kind of get a certificate. So I was at Lone Star College exploring my electives. And I had a child development class, and my professor was a social worker. And he is the one that really inspired me because he just looked so happy teaching, and on the side doing social work, on the side being an activist, on the side being like a fashionista. I was just in awe. And then that's the first time I think I heard about social work being a profession that you can really do a lot with, I think, because I've met a social worker when I was in high school, but then now it was just different because he looked so happy doing it. And I think he is the one who inspired me, a professor at Lone Star College during when I was taking my electives and exploring what to do. And he's the one that brought me into it. I Googled one day social work Houston schools, and UHD was the first school on Google. So I started the program, I think the next following year.
Oh, so you were just destined to be here.
I think so. I mean, I feel like I was inspired, but then I feel like because of when I was in high school, I had a friend die by suicide. Right. So we had a social worker come into the school, and I think that was the first time where I was like, oh, these are really good people. They really do say the right things at the right time, and no one wants to see a social worker, right? Because one thing is that like something's happening in your life to see one, but they are just so really, they can really inspire you to really work with others and really feel rewarded at the end of the day, I think.
That's amazing. That's a wonderful story.
Really?
I can definitely relate going into education and being like, I've had so many teachers inspire me the same way.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear that it's the same way in social work as well.
Right. Because you see, I guess kind of like, I think what it was about that professor was that he was, he had such a beautiful personality. Right. He was flamboyant. He was African-American. He was in the process of adopting a child with the same-sex partner. And he just looked like he was doing everything. And I was like, wow, like, I want to be like you, like I want to like do what you do. And he was teaching child development. So you really get inspired by people in these really rewarding professions. I think like education, social work, human services. You meet such good people, I think, in those industries and those professions.
I love that. That's beautiful. So funny enough, since we're talking about the profession and what inspired you to be there, describe three things, that have been most important to you in choosing your career.
I think the three most important things is getting starting a career that's going to be rewarding, right. A career that is going to make me feel like I made a difference, and what was the question again? I'm sorry.
It's the three things that were most important to you for choosing your career.
Yes, and knowing that there is a need in the community for social workers. Coming from a minority background, being Hispanic, Spanish speaking, I really felt like I could make a difference, and I think that's what drew me into this career. Knowing that I feel like I had the heart to do it also, because it's not an easy profession. It is a very stressful profession, but when you know you have the heart for it, you know that you can do it, and you can go home and leave work at work and go home and do home stuff, I think. And I felt like I could do that just based on going through the bachelor's program, seeing what that was like, doing my practicum at the DA's office when I was in my bachelor's program. So a lot of practice that made me understand, like, I can do this. I can listen to these stories, hold their emotions of my clients with them during that time, and then leave it at work because it belongs at work.
Right. So speaking of leaving things at work and having home for home, how do you navigate a work-life balance, especially with such a trauma-heavy profession?
Very good question, because that is something we always talk about in classes in the bachelor's, master's program, how to deal with stress, because stress is to be expected. Burnout is really real, and burnout is when one just feels like just burnt out of their job. They just can't do it anymore. It's too much to handle. What I have found is that whatever I did during my batch, whenever I started going to school, whatever I was doing to self-care then is what I'm going to be doing to self-care now. So what I found out that works is having friends who I met in the profession, who I can meet outside of school and go out and not talk about work, but know that we can like touch on it a little bit and they understand how stressful it is, but we go out and we just disconnect. And also one more thing is just spending time outside without your cellular device, because when you open up Facebook, when you open up any social media, the news that is happening, all the violence that's happening. So I found too, when I go home, I don't often get on my phone immediately. I go out in my hammock. I have a beautiful hammock outside that I just lay there, and that's the best time to just not take the phone out there though, and just lay there. And that's kind of how I process my day. I start to think about like what happened at work, and then what I'm gonna do to like take care of myself now being at home.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. So what are some strengths and skills that you have when pursuing a career in social work?
Yes, skills definitely would be time management, because you have a caseload and you need to know how to time manage it, because most often you're going to be on your own with a caseload with clients that you're going to see. And so you definitely need to have really good time management skills, patience, be a good listener, and be very empathetic, because you have to be very empathetic for a job like this, because clients expect, you meet with clients who maybe have never had someone actually listen to them. And this is a career where we're like professional listeners, we're professional processors of like the information, and we validate so many feelings. So one must really be empathetic, be really good with their time management, and I think really just know how to focus on one client and leave everything behind. And that's not so easy to kind of focus when you have so much going on, and it's just really like focusing on right here and right now. Being present a lot is really, really important.
So since we're talking about what a day kind of looks like in general, what does a day in the office look like for you, especially with COVID and everything that's currently going on?
Absolutely. So I do commute to work. So I ride the Metro bus, which I love because it allows me 20 minutes before I get to work to just close my eyes and just enjoy the ride, not have to drive over there. So definitely public transportation is great. I get to my office, and then I do have an essential oil diffuser in my office that I have a habit. I turn it on, I put some lemon or some eucalyptus to kind of get the smells going, for like kind of set the mood for the rest of the day, because that when I get to the office, that's probably going to be one of the only times until my lunchtime where I have to kind of do something that doesn't have to do with like clients or like focusing on work. So I do get to work like 15 minutes early to prep my space. I do my essential oil diffuser. I put my drops in. I have a few plants in my office as well to kind of get those, kind of get my clients a homey space. So I water my plants and then I sit down, and then it's 8 a.m. at that point. And then I check my emails. I look at the client that I will be interviewing, because I do interview victims of domestic violence who are seeking protective orders. And I have 3 clients every day. So I do spend the first 30 minutes reviewing their file, meaning I have ran all of their criminal history. I have looked at their application, and then the client comes in. I see this client from 8:30 until 11. And then I have my next client at 11:30, and then I have lunch, and then I have my next client at 2 p.m. And then, so it's 3 clients a day, which they're all seeking protective orders. And then I get off work at 5, and then every single day looks like this, except on Thursdays, when it's which is my paperwork day, meaning that is the day dedicated to filing the protective orders and catching up on all my notes. Because one thing about social work, there is so many notes that we have to do, because if you didn't note it, it didn't happen. So there's so much happening. So typically that's what it looks like. I have lunch for an hour, and then I do have lunch typically sometimes with my coworkers, where we don't talk about work. We have lunch and we talk about things that are happening in our lives, funny things. We laugh because we know that we're about to get back into an interview that's going to be really tough, trauma and violent heavy.
Got it. So since I know kind of a little bit about social workers, can you kind of tell me what kind of social worker you are, and then kind of touch on the different kinds of social workers? Because I know there's not just like one kind.
Absolutely. There is so many different things that a social worker can do. One can be a caseworker, a therapist. They can be so many different things in the community, such as advocates. What I do is I am a caseworker, and I specifically do a really trauma-informed approach to my clients, because it is their going through family violence. And so I dedicate my time to focusing on that. And it's really heavy, but it's really rewarding.
That's amazing. So how has COVID-19 impacted your job in your field, especially with, I know I saw the other day that domestic abuse statistics, like that's rising, child abuse, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So how does it look now, especially with everything being virtual too?
Yes. So for right now, there is a huge backlog of person seeking protective orders, because prior to COVID, it was walk-ins. So clients used to typically walk into our office and first come, first serve. So they went there and got services right then and there. Now what clients are having to do post-COVID is that they walk in, they fill out an application, and then they leave it there with us. And then 3 or 5 weeks, it will be about 3 or 5 weeks until a caseworker is available to contact them to set up an interview. So we are behind about 2 months, and that's only because that is how many people are coming in, and there's not enough caseworkers to interview these clients, because since COVID, when we went on lockdown, a lot of the victims of domestic violence were then forced to what's it called? When forced to
the word.
Yeah, forced to they're forced to
like they have to stay in the same place.
Yeah, they're what's that word? They were forced to
it's not cohabitate.
not cohabitate, they're forced to be in lockdown in their home. They're forced to
confined.
They were confined to their homes. Yes. So many people were confined with their abusers. And because of that, lots of violence was not reported because they could not safely contact the police, or they could not safely find a place in their home to be interviewed for 1.5 to 3 hours for the protective order. Right. So it has really changed a lot. Right now, we are seeing many clients who talk about what happened during COVID. And really, I use COVID as a way to kind of find out when incidents of violence happen, because with protective orders, we do have to ask our clients, like, what are the recent incidents of violence to prove that we could file this protective order. And lots of the time, so many things are happen around COVID, pre-COVID or after COVID. Lots of the times, I have a lot of clients tell me that ever since their abuser lost their job during COVID, they have just increased in aggression. There's not enough money. And so there's so much just stress happening in that household. So COVID has really impacted, I think, so many people here in Houston that I know that I talk to. And it is just really hard to obtain services anywhere, really, because there is such a long waiting list, because every single agency where we refer our clients to obtain counseling or therapy services, they just have months long waiting list because of everyone's trying to seek these services. Domestic violence is seriously going up since COVID. Right. Since Harvey, since COVID, since the winter storm.
So many instances.
So many, yeah.
Right. So in order for our students to be ready when they're graduating, or even when they're juniors and seniors, what are some of the skills that they can develop when preparing to be a social worker?
Absolutely. I love this question, because UHD provided me with so many opportunities to explore and to really, how do you say it? Like, really see a lot of different cultures, I want to say, because UHD allowed me to volunteer. UHD allowed me to study abroad with the study abroad office. And I think that's one thing that really helped me move forward, because I had so much to draw from whenever I went to interviews, because I knew that I had a lot of experience working with different cultures, because I studied abroad, I volunteered in the community, I put myself out there to really be able to draw from these experiences. Because also, while I was at UHD, I was a mentor for intellectually and developmentally disabled adults. And so that really helped, because when I get interviewed for these jobs, I'm able to be like, oh, I have experience working with this population. And then everyone, supervisors who I've interviewed with, they're just so interested to know that someone has experience working with different populations, because Houston is a very diverse city. It's a melting pot. And in my current job position, I do see a lot of clients, and a lot of these clients are from maybe some of the countries that I visited. So I'm able to draw from, oh, I know a little bit about how that culture kind of works in the family aspect. And so I love being able to do that. And it's really because I took and I sought out many opportunities to be able to hang out with the community. And that was all what I was trying to explore social work, because one needs to be a social person. One needs to be kind of out there in the community, experiencing different populations, because that is what social work is about. So many different people from all walks of life. No person is immune to violence or to crime. It could happen to anybody. So really in social work, you would just really see all types of people. So it really is helpful to volunteer and to take on experiences and apply for experiences, to be able to put yourself out there, to be able to then draw from those experiences when you're being interviewed for these jobs, for these practicum settings. It is so helpful and so impressive to others to know that you've studied, you've traveled, or that you've volunteered in the community, and that you can talk about those experiences and what you gain from it. I think that's so, so valuable moving forward.
And then what are some of the organizations that you got all of this experience in? And could you tell our audience, because I know there are a lot of people that want to know, just different ways that they can get involved.
Absolutely. So when I was an undergrad student, I was really interested in working with survivors of sex trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
So I would volunteer with one agency that was a Christian-based agency. I think it's Free the Captives. So I volunteer with them to be able to see what it is to be a volunteer with them, what it takes to volunteer with them. And so really it was seeking agencies that would take volunteers. And so you're volunteering, you don't get paid for it, but what you get out of it is so rewarding, because you can volunteer with like the Beacon, which is a homeless shelter right here in downtown. And so with that, you get a lot, you get to really experience like the reality of what people are going through. And then also with the UHD bachelor's program, when I started my practicum, I was able to spend 250 hours at the DA's office doing my practicum. And then with that, when I was at UHD social work program with the Center of Community Engagement there, the College of Public Service director there, he would go out in the community, and he would have a lot of different speakers come speak at the College of Public Service. So I would always talk to him about like, hey, is there chances to volunteer over there or over here? Because he would have these strong connections. So I built a network of people who could touch on those agencies to connect me with them and be able to see, hey, they're really hiring. And because they have that connection, I was able to be like, hey, can you vouch for me? And that was the one where when I worked with intellectually developmentally disabled adults, I was able to build that connection. So really it's networking is big, huge key. And really with your university, going to different departments to see what connections they have and build on those connections and go with them and volunteer, so you can build your resume and really be able to talk so much endlessly during your interviews for a new job or when you're trying to get a practicum. So many different possibilities.
Amazing. That's good to know. And of course, I'm going to throw it out there. The community of the program here at UHD, CCESL, they do all community engagement stuff. So they are who you go to get these experiences. And they will help connect you, not only in your own department, but in different departments around the university as well. So we're going to stop really quickly and ask, are there any questions from our live audience? We would love to answer them.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Have you only worked in the domestic violence department, or have you also worked in other departments?
Good question. Yes. So when I was doing my practicum with the social work program here for my bachelor's, I was actually in the victim services division at the DA's office. So that was my first experience at the DA's office working with the victim services division. I then went to do my practicum during my master's program at the Children's Assessment Center, where I provided therapy to sexually abused children here in Harris County. And then, so I worked with those two, but now because I had that initial connection with the Victim Services Division with the DA's office, I was able to obtain this new job in the Domestic Violence Division. So it was a quick, not a quick, but it was an easy way to move into a different department because I had that initial experience that I received with my bachelor's program. So I've worked with sexually abused children and domestic violence and victims of crime.
That's such extensive experience. Oh my goodness.
This experience is valuable because you're able to find out like if you can handle it or not. And when it's in a practicum environment, you're allowed to make mistakes. So it's so important to speak to your professors or to the people here in these departments to see if they have these sort of opportunities, so you can get your feet wet and see if you can what experiences you have with it or what sort of reactions you have with it. Because when I was providing therapy to the sexually abused children, I realized that I did not want to be a therapist, and that's something I thought that I was destined to be, but I realized that maybe not yet, but I needed to have that experience to know that during a practicum setting or during like, my field, instead of jumping into it as my career and realizing like, oh my gosh, like I never had experience in this. And now I realize that I can't handle it, or I feel like I need more practice before I can have such a role as a therapist. But having a master's in social work, and then once I am licensed, I can become a therapist if I see that like that is a job that I want. But definitely it's wonderful to get these experiences to see if that's something that you would like to do.
Amazing. And thank you for the wonderful question. Do we have any more?
The second question, I think you answered it in your previous answer. So.
Perfect. Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Sorry, I accidentally hit mute again. So I'm a pre-social work major, so I'm very excited. I wanted to know, I know that you decided not to go toward the therapy portion, but is there like a separate certificate if you wanted to do therapy or what?
So to be a therapist, you do have to be a licensed master's social worker. So once you obtain your master's degree, you can immediately sign up to test to become licensed. And then once you have your licensed master social work, which is just a license on top of your master's, you can become a therapist and provide therapy to children or adults. And then once you're in fields such as that, you may be able to be supervised by a licensed clinical social worker, which after a certain amount of time, you can then become a licensed clinical social worker, which means that then you can open up your own private practice. So it really starts with obtaining your master's degree in social work after you obtain your bachelor's degree in social work.
Okay, so it's basically just a test on top of more education.
Exactly, yes. For the licensed master social work, yes. And then with the licensed clinic or social worker degree, you do need to have about, I do not know how many hours, but a certain amount of hours working with clients.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Congrats with going to social work. It is such a more rewarding career.
And thank you for the question. That actually leads me to another question that we hadn't touched on yet. What is the kind of, I guess, the line of like what you have to do? Like, how does that work? Like, do you need your master's to be a social worker? Or can you do stuff with your bachelor's?
You can absolutely do stuff with your bachelor's. And I think that was my plan, to just get my bachelor's. I never imagined that I would have a master's degree, because I was literally never so focused in school, or never like, it was never a priority of mine to be a master's degree in social work. But after being in the bachelor's program, we were highly encouraged by our professors, because our salary can increase so much more with just one more year of school, because I was able to obtain my master's by going into UH with advanced standing, because I did have a bachelor's in social work. But with the bachelor's in social work, there are so many different careers, job opportunities that you can take. You can also become a licensed bachelor's social work. Again, you take a licensing test, but you are highly encouraged to get your master's, because just the opportunity increase, and there's so many more opportunities for jobs. And with bachelor's, there's lots of jobs, but it is limited, because most agencies want at least a master in social work degree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's so many opportunities. I have so many friends who have just decided to just stay with their bachelor's, and they're doing great, but I know that they do have a goal to obtain their master's.
Wow, okay. And then what are some professional organizations that kind of helped you obtain those certifications and different things like that?
Yes, the NASW, National Association of Social Workers, is a nationwide community that you would join if you're a social worker. And then with them, they have lots of different opportunities to present at conferences, or to network, or to look at forums. So it is a nationwide agency that you join. And then with them, it is the National Association of Social Workers. So they do have a Facebook page as well, where you're able to network and connect with other social workers. So that is one of the big ones that I always look back at to see what stuff are they doing, because they do have conferences every year in different parts of Texas, because I am a part of the National Association of Social Workers in Texas.
Mhm.
So every year they have a conference either in Galveston or Texas where all the social workers go to a conference and they talk about what they're doing in the community and they network. So that is one incredible opportunity that I hope to one day participate in. I applied to present at one of these conferences at one point during COVID, and it was to discuss my study abroad in social work whenever I traveled to India with the UHD bachelor's program. So it was one thing I wanted to present on. And with that, I wanted to do that to be able to further network with other social workers who are interested in the international aspect of it.
Wow, okay. And are there any other ones that possibly like have a UHD chapter or something like that that our students can join now to help them move on in their careers?
Absolutely. Phi Alpha Honor Society. That is the honor society from here at the social work department. And with them, you also are able to obtain a lot of information about things that are going on in the community and other, it's a prestigious honor society that you can put on your resume, and it looks like you are part of a larger community.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that information.
Absolutely.
And then what are some books that students can look at now that you possibly use that you needed, or just different books that you've read about the profession that helped you get to where you are now?
Yes, I want to say that I did go a lot to Half Price Books, to the psychology section. And at one point when I was when I thought that I wanted to work with children who were sexually abused and be a therapist, I did obtain a lot of books that just talked about sexual abuse and its dynamics, and then just really looking at the populations and reading books about the populations that interested me. And now I look at a lot of articles about domestic violence and the effects that like strangulation has on the person. And so right now I'm not of a reader, but I do like to read articles or peer-reviewed journals about what's happening in domestic violence and how the climate has changed since COVID. So now I do read a lot of things that interest me. In the past, I don't think I really ever read a to be honest, other than probably the code of ethics for social workers that I always draw on. And it's a list of code of ethics that I even now always think about when I think about the approach that I'm going to take with my clients.
Right. That is good to know. And then like, is the code of ethics like a certain book, or is that like a pamphlet that you always have to have with you? Is that something they can obtain beforehand?
Yes, it is going to be on the NASW website where you can read the code of ethics, because this is a code of ethics that all social workers abide by and always follow. And it is really what the code of ethics is, like the rules that we obey by. So it is something that all social workers always draw back to, because it allows you to see how to approach clients and how to handle certain situations that may make you feel like you need to draw back to these code of ethics, because it really draws you to what the point of social worker is, which is really to give services in an unbiased format to any client without any prejudices, any biases. So it really teaches you how to approach a client. So I think that's one thing that one will always look at in the social work career.
So I have a really good question, really quickly.
Yeah.
What are some challenges that you had getting into social work, and then as you were a social worker, what were some of those really big challenges that you had, and then how did you overcome them?
Yes, a really big challenge that I had was the fact that I know that I'm going to be working with all sorts of different people.
Right.
I wanted to work with children who were sexually abused. So I did realize that at one point I would have to work with the perpetrators of sexual abuse. So with those, we just approached them with an unbiased format, because all clients deserve the same sort of services. They all deserve empathy. So that was one thing that I really actually had to discuss a lot with my supervisors, to let them know, like, you know, sexual abusers, like that's one thing that like I just wouldn't want to have that client. But then we do discuss the fact that like if we do not feel comfortable working with the client, we have to talk to one of our colleagues and see if maybe we can do a switch, because this client needs to be seen. Maybe not by me, because I know that I may not be able to provide the best services, but then at the end of the day, the code of ethics will tell us that every single client deserves the same sort of services. So that's one thing that I thought would be challenging. But now I do work with I would say like, yeah, like applicants who are applying for domestic violence, like protective orders, who may have a charge in the past where they committed that. So we do have to discuss that, like what happened, because again, at the end of the day, they all deserve services. So that was one big thing that I thought would be an issue. But at the end of the day, I do draw back to the code of ethics, which tells me all clients deserve services.
Right. And I'm going to go back to our live audience to see if anybody has questions. We saw a lot of people coming in.
So there is a follow-up question.
Yeah.
To a comment you made earlier. It's they want to confirm, you said it took you 1 year to complete your bachelor's degree once you transferred here?
It took me 1 year to complete my master's degree, but with my bachelor's degree, I obtained it from 2017 until 2020. And so that's how long it took me to get my bachelor's degree here in UHD, and then 1 year at the master's program, because I was able to enroll as advanced standing because I had that bachelor's degree already established. Okay, so that's
Like 4 years?
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah, 3 or 4 years.
And thank you for that question and for the clarification. Are there any more?
That's it for right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
And
Good
thank
question.
you. And if anyone has any more questions and they want to unmute themselves and ask,
Somebody wants to
please feel
ask-
free to. Oh, go ahead.
Somebody asked if you could repeat your title because they weren't here for the first part.
Yeah, so I am technically a case worker. I would not be a social worker until I obtain my license, and I am currently set to take it in mid-April. So right now I am a caseworker at the Domestic Violence Division at the Harris County District Attorney's Office.
Wow, okay. And then talk about the testing that is required of you, like how many certificates do you need? What does that process look like?
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of master social workers aim for is to obtain their licensing, which is a test that is about 150 to 200 questions. And they ask a lot of questions about like ethics, a lot about scenarios. They give you a scenario about a client who may come into your office and what's the first step to take with them. So it's a huge test. We do have to study for it. We have lots of study materials that are provided for us, but it is a time test and it is serious. But once you obtain that test, once you pass that test, you do become licensed. And so that leads you to the pathway of becoming a licensed clinical social worker, which then will allow you to supervise other social workers. So it really leads up, but right now I'm hoping to obtain my license, and which will allow me to go to the path of providing more personal services.
And then are there any specific certificates that you had to get beforehand, like leading up to that licensing, or can you just go straight to licensing?
Yeah, you can just go straight to licensing after obtaining your master's or bachelor's degree.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification. So what are some different things that students can research in Google to learn about social work if they're thinking that this is maybe what they want to do, or they just want to know more about it, since there are so many things that they can do when they obtain that bachelor's of social work?
Absolutely. I always, even now that I have a job, I always go to the UH job board, because there they have so many postings. You'll see all the different careers that you could take, all the different job titles that a social worker can have. And then there you'll really see how much of a need there is for social workers in the community. And so I always go back to just look at what the jobs that are being offered. And one, if you have a social work degree, you can do so many things. There's literally a social worker at police offices, the DA's office, libraries, churches, agencies that offer countless services. So there could be a social worker anywhere. You could work, you could be a therapist, you could work in the jail, you could do so many different things. So I always go back to just seeing job boards and seeing what jobs are available, to see like how much they're offering, what could it lead to, because lots of agencies can also offer you free supervision, because supervision to obtain your licensed clinical social work degree, you do have to pay for it, or it's either offered at some jobs. So really looking at the ones that benefit you the most.
Oh, so that's good to know.
Yes, because some jobs do offer free supervision to obtain then their licensed clinical social worker degree.
Oh.
Other times it costs about like $90 an hour, and it's like a weekly thing.
Wow.
So it really depends. There's so many different opportunities. So in the career social worker, I think it's only growing since COVID.
Right. And so what are some changes to come that students who are interested in this field are starting to go into this field can expect, especially with the changes because of COVID and things like that?
Absolutely. There is definitely going to be a high caseload because there is just so many clients needing services right now. And one can expect to really feel rewarded because lots of clients do not seek these services. They do not go out and get help. So whenever you know that you have touched the client's like heart or life, you know that you have made even the tiniest difference or that you have planted that seed, really is knowing that you can make a huge difference in many people's lives.
That's amazing. And then are there any specific tips that you have for students who are getting ready to go into that field? Like as someone who's already there and working to obtain that master, what are those things that you wish that you knew before you got there that would have helped you?
Definitely the networking part of when you're a student is essential. You definitely want to build some hardcore networking right now because once you graduate, those are the people that you're going to be requesting like, hey, can you write me a recommendation letter? Because that's one thing that was super important into getting into the master's program was to get really good recommendations letter from those professors that have seen your growth. And a lot of it is really communicating with professors, people in the community, talking to them about your experiences, because then they really get to see like your growth and building your network. I think is super important because once you place your feet into an agency, they want to keep you if they see that you are willing to work for free, as in like you're willing to volunteer, participate in their field practicum experience. They see that you are wanting to put in the work and effort. So that is one thing that's super important, is to really build those good networks. And that happens, I think, at like the bachelor's level, whenever you go to school, when you have time to build these networks, like coming to these different departments and speaking to those in charge and seeing what connections they have and how they can, because everyone wants to help the social worker build these connections.
That is definitely good to know.
Oh, yeah.
And then one question that we ask a lot here, what are some soft skills that students can develop? Those are the skills that like nobody ever really teaches or you don't really know until like later on. What are those soft skills that our students can develop right now to help them not only be better social workers, but be better networkers as well?
It's really having your elevator pitch, like having your pitch that says like, this is who I am and this is what I want to do. And this is like presenting yourself really well and having really good communication. And I think really having that want and like that attitude, like if I want it, I'm going to get it. And you really need to be motivated because lots of people want these positions, these jobs, but you really have to really impress somebody and really have a really good approach and practice that approach. And you only really get that from just talking to different people and getting feedback and being open to feedback, even if it's critical feedback where you might not like what they say. Take that and like really take it in and know that it's coming from a good place, because they only want you to improve these things that you may be lacking. I know for me, it was, I think right now, because I am so bubbly, I do get a lot of feedback over there at my job where like, I know that I am expected to testify in court at one point. So whenever I was practicing how to testify, they told me to like, know your environment, know where you're at, because you can't be that way all the time, but that's who I am. But then it's knowing, really being really, you have to be really self-aware. I think very self-aware about the different ways that you interact with others to fit the environment.
Right. And then what are some things that you learned when you got into social work that helped you move through some of those really hard things, like interviewing those trauma clients or interviewing the sexually abused children and stuff like that? What did you learn that helped you be able to have the strength to do that? Because I know a lot of people are trying to gain that strength. So how did you do that?
I think it's really discussing with your supervisor what happened during the session, what thoughts you had that kind of got you stuck, because you are just going to be hit left and right with different things. And it's really, while you're practicing, is talking to your professors, talking to your supervisors, like what happened, what approach you took, and why you think that approach is not the best. And then it's just taking that and actually applying it next time, because you'll realize, I know I have, whenever I was providing therapy and then I felt like maybe I was not validating enough, but then my supervisor would tell me like, no, you did validate, you did this, and that, and like you planted a seed, and that person is going to think about that little thing you said, even though you didn't validate A, B, C, and D, you validated E and F, and that's really important. So it's really understanding that you will make mistakes, but that client is just going to be grateful that somebody was listening to them, someone was there with them, that lots of people tell me stories that they have never told anybody else. And it's just knowing that, wow, like realizing that I am that healing tool, but I am really helping them recognize that they're the ones that are going to help themselves heal themselves.
Right. And we touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you decompress and take care of your mental health, especially when you get those really hard cases?
Yes, I go home and it's hard because I will be honest, sometimes I want to go home and just go to sleep to turn my brain off because there's just so much going on. But really what helps is talking to my colleagues or friends from school about it, because I can talk to my sister about it, but she doesn't want to hear it. It's too much trauma for her to handle. She didn't sign up to hear about trauma.
Right.
It's having those friends. And I met my best friend in 2017 in the UHD social work program, and her and I are best friends. And because I am able to talk to her about what's going on, and she doesn't even have to respond, but she's just like, yeah, I feel you. Like, I get it. And that is just so, you're going to have colleagues or your friends from social work program, if you want to be a social worker, to decompress, because I know that my brother, my sister, they don't want to hear what happened at work, and because it's just so much. So it's really having those friends that come from the same background as you to really talk to them about some of the things that go on, because I definitely need to sometimes process things by just saying it out loud, and it's hard.
Right. Well, obviously, thank you so much for what you do, because you literally help so many people just get through life.
Yeah.
And it can be very hard, especially in such a trauma-based field.
Yeah, and it could, anyone could be a victim of crime. Anyone can be a victim of domestic violence, or anyone would probably need to see a social worker at one point. But it's really, it's just knowing that you're available for those clients to be able to come to you, and it's so rewarding. I think that's the number one thing about social work career. It is a rewarding career.
Right. And of course, I would be remiss to not ask, if somebody just happens to find themselves in a situation where they would need a social worker or someone to help them through something like that, what should they do?
I would say the first step is to probably call a hotline. They will direct you to an agency that can assist you fit the needs that you have. A lot of the times I have clients who the first time they ever realized they were in a domestic violence situation is when they just Googled it and they called the hotline, and that's the person who helped them leave the home. So it's really in social work, we teach our clients to really advocate for themselves and to get their services, and for me to assist them in doing it, but not to do it for them. So really advocating for them, self-autonomy to do it themselves. And it's finding those resources, and it's hard sometimes, but really Googling what's out there to really get connected to these agencies. Because once a client gets connected to these agencies, they're just often in all about all the services that they could obtain for free or for income-based, because they're victims of crimes or domestic violence.
And of course, could you just name a couple of those agencies just so people can point either their loved ones or someone in the right place?
Absolutely. I know that ABDA, Aid to Victims of Domestic Violence, they offer batterers intervention courses for abusers. They also offer child and adult counseling sessions. The Houston Area Women's Center is right here in downtown. They offer counseling, shelter, transitional housing, and that one's super important because they offer confidential, they can put you in a confidential location if you're trying to flee an abusive situation. Also, Lone Star Legal Aid is an agency where you can obtain legal aid and advice that is income-based. Oftentimes, people just don't know what to do, how to navigate these things, and getting to those agencies is one way to really get connected into what services are out there. There's so many. There's also, just depending on what area you're in Houston, there is an agency there. I know that we have the Northwest Assistance Ministries, which is NAM. And then we also have the Fort Bend Ministries. I believe every single county has an agency where it is just like a one-stop shop where they can obtain counseling, transitional housing, financial assistance, and everything.
And for our live audience, we will be adding all of these things in the chat or sending them out later, so that way you guys have access to all of these things. Are there any more questions from our live audience?
There is, one of them asked, can you tell us about your experience, the UHD program and the process for applying to the program?
UHD bachelor's program?
No, the master's program.
Yes, okay, so the master's program, I did do that at UH. And the process to applying for the master's program at UH was applying online and then submitting 2 or 3 recommendation letters. And then also having your bachelor's degree in social work allowed me to start the advanced standing. So having that, it was a quick process because I did have that base of UHD's bachelor's program, which was easy to become enrolled in. After I obtained my associate's in arts degree from Lone Star, I was able to quickly apply for the UHD bachelor's program. I submitted, I think in both instances, a letter that describes kind of like what brought me to this career, because I think in social work, a lot of the directors want to know, like, why do you want to be in social work? Like, what was it that inspired you? Explain how you can really make a difference in the community. So you definitely want to have a well-drafted letter. And then you do want to have some volunteer experience as well, so you can show that you have done some work in the community.
And then the next question we have is, any recommendations about geriatric department?
Ooh, the geriatric department, yes. So I do know, so I work at the DA's office and they do have an elder division. So they have an agency that focuses strictly on elders who are victims of crime. So I know that is one place where one can obtain a job, but I also know that Dr. Angela Goins at the UHD social work program, she specializes in geriatrics, and I believe that is her focus. So she is a professor at UHD social work program, and I know that she has really good connections because she's worked with that population for so long. But geriatrics is one career that I found when I was in my bachelor's program, that there is you can really, there's a lot of money there, because there's a lot of, you can really, a social worker can get a really, really good paying career in geriatrics.
Okay. And then are there any like specific fields where there's more need versus others, or is it all about the same? We need social workers.
I think it's all about the same. We need social workers. I think that there is a lot of social workers. There's a lot of the retention rate is not as high. Social workers often don't stay in the job too often, but then there's a lot of jobs available, but it's hard to retain the social workers because burnout is super, super real. And that secondhand trauma really aids to that burnout that lots of social workers experience, but social workers are just needed everywhere really right now. And I think it was like that before COVID, but maybe now after COVID, has been exploded.
Right. And is there a way to kind of combat that burnout? Is there a way to come back from that?
I think it's really knowing how to self-care. And I think in self-care, that starts with how you were self-caring when you were in school, because what you were doing when you were a student is the same self-care that you're going to do as you start a career. And it's really hard to disconnect sometimes. So I know that on the weekends, I have the weekends off and I don't do anything. I mean, I try to socialize, but lots of times I'm recharging my batteries. And I think that's one more thing that I'm very picky about how I spend my time, because I just focus on how I can just be recharged and ready to start a new week, because I have a career now and it's like, that is my number one thing. So I am very picky about the relationships that I hold, because I want to remain mentally well to handle everything at work, because I cannot in social work, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So the days that I need to take off, I call in whenever I just need a day off. I don't feel guilty about it, because I know that we have a plan to cover the clients that I can't see, because I need to be okay to see this client, because I'm going to spend 1 hour to 3 hours with them listening to their story, and I need to be okay to do so. So it is encouraged that if I'm feeling stressed, if I even tell my supervisor, I'm stressed, I don't know what to do, she'll be like, go home, take the day off tomorrow and come back the next day to take care of yourself.
And that's so important.
So important.
Yes, especially in a career in public service. Please take care of yourself.
Take care of yourself.
Oh, I think I hear. Is somebody trying to ask a question from the live audience?
Huh?
Oh,
Because she might not like nothing.
and then,
Oh,
listen,
she can't walk.
so I think, are there any, kind of just anything else that you would like to kind of encourage the students who are going into social work?
I definitely encourage you to talk to your professors about what concerns you may have about maybe feeling stressed about it, because it is not for everybody, but you know when it's for you, because it is, you know that you have the heart. You probably find yourself being like the social worker of the family, or the therapist of the family, or the person that your friends always go to. And it's just really listening to the feedback that they tell you, like, wow, you know, you're such a good listener. And then knowing that like you can make a difference with that. You can get paid to be a good listener,
Right.
but it takes so much more than that. You really need to know how to take care of yourselves and be able to really do so much during that time that you have with your client, but then also know that like you're only really sometimes just planting that seed. If they do not want to maybe take it all in, you're really just planting that seed. And it's a rewarding job, and really it is a career that can give you so much of a rich life, really, because you know that you're making such a big difference in the community.
Well, thank you so much for your time and being here and giving our students all the information they need. We're gonna go back to our audience just to see if there are any last minute questions before we wrap up for the day.
Once we get with a certain department, are we able to later on switch to another department?
Yeah, like let's say you're working at like the Harris County DA's office.
Mhm.
Whenever they have like a job opening, they always let their internal employees know, because they want to have that switch from one department to another. And like, for example, for the DA's office, there's the victim services division, the sex crimes division, I think that the sex crimes may be next to the child abuse division, the domestic violence division, the elder abuse division. There are so many different agencies, and each one has their own social worker with their own, because I do work with the criminal justice department technically. So it is just so many departments. And yeah, usually when you work with an agency, they want to keep their internal staff there. So there's so many opportunities to move around, because usually where there's a social worker in an agency, there's many different departments where they need that social worker. Yeah, so it's really good to build those networks and to show them that the people where you work, that you want to work, because they see it. I often go into my office and I don't interact with any supervisor or any colleague for an entire day. I'm just focused on my clients, but it's because we're trusted to handle our business, take care of it, do our notes, and we self-manage ourselves really in social work, because there's not enough time for a supervisor to be like breathing down our back. So there's really a lot of trust, and your work speaks for itself, because we do so much documentation, and they really look at what you're documenting and they see that you've touched every single thing that you have to. So the work you do speaks for itself.
Then are there any specific like types of form of documentation that students can probably learn beforehand that they're going to use in the field, like for say like Excel or something, you know, you can get a certification from LinkedIn Learning. Is there anything like that that social workers can do and social work students can do?
Ooh, so I really don't know about any certifications of that sort, but I do know that when I got into the master's program, I learned about SOAP notes. And it's a way that social workers document their interactions with their clients. Don't ask SOAP stands for, I do not know right now, but it is a form of documentation that all social workers usually typically do in their work. So I wish I would have known about that before starting my master's, because now I definitely do the SOAP note form, where we touch all the bases. And it's really because we might spend like 3 hours with our client, and our notes have to reflect those 3 hours that you spent with the client. So it's really touching about like their emotions, what they stated. So it's perfect documentation. I think if you start looking at how that language looks, you'll really see what is required of you in the social work field. SOAP, like the bar soap.
Got it. Thank you so much. And then were there any last questions?
No, that was it.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for attending our CLC this evening. We will go ahead, and if you could just give them your contact information so that way they can reach out for any questions that they might have for you.
Absolutely. You guys can contact me.
Excuse me.
Oh, I think we have.
Oh,
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting. I was
No,
trying to write my question down, but I heard that they were ending it. I want to ask, like, if the job is it mainly an office environment? Because I know for some departments you also, how do I explain it? You go and reach the client, like you visit them.
Yeah, so in social work, many times will you be out in the community. In my specific job, I am only in the office. I may need to meet them at court sometimes, but in social work, expect typically to go out into their homes and do a home visit. I do have many friends who work in that where they travel most of their time. They go out to their homes and they do home visits, home studies. So yeah, with social work, I think one can expect to make some trips out to their home because we really do build such an intimate connection with their clients where, yeah, we probably will go to their homes. We will not go to the mall or like out to a restaurant or anything with their clients, but we definitely go out to their homes and meet them where they're at. So yeah, expect to probably visit clients, but not all jobs require that. Not all jobs in social work require that.
And thank you so much for that question. Does anybody else have any last minute questions before we go ahead and wrap up? I think that's it. Well, thank you all so much for attending, and we will see you all next time for our next CLC. Thank you so much.